Norway and Sweden, two Scandinavian countries among the most peaceful places on earth. They're both in the global top 20 and almost every traveler's bucket list. They promise the perfect Scandinavian getaway. They're home to a progressive population. The crime rates are incredibly low. The governance systems are quite efficient. Norway and Sweden almost always make it to the top 10 of the Global Happiness Index. But that's not the reason why we're talking about them tonight. Some recent events paint a completely different picture of these lands. Two cities in these two nations witnessed violent protests. Malmö, the third largest city in Sweden, and Oslo, the capital of Norway, both saw violent demonstrations over the weekend. They were quite similar in nature. There was vandalism, there was arson, protesters clashing with police, and some small-scale riots. What triggered this violence? I'll start with Sweden. The trouble started on Friday. A hardline politician was denied permission to hold a meeting on the quote-unquote Islamisation of the Nordic countries. His name is Rasmus Paludan. He has often been accused of inciting sentiments against ethnic groups. He is the leader of Stram Kurs, a hardline Danish political party. He was in Malmö on the invitation of some Swedish activists. But he was blocked from holding a meeting. In protest, his followers and members of his party burned a copy of the Quran, the holy book of Islam. They did this near a predominantly migrant neighborhood. And then they uploaded the entire video on the internet. What followed next has been a subject of much debate on social media. Some 300 protesters hit the streets, they burnt tires, they raised slogans, they threw stones at the cops, they vandalized shops. At least 3 people were arrested for inciting hatred. Some 15 others were detained for damaging public property. The violence in Malmö subsided by the next morning, but some 720 kilometers away, in the capital of Norway, the protest was just beginning. In Oslo, clashes broke out on Saturday at a quote-unquote anti-Muslim rally. This happened right outside the Parliament of Norway. A rally was organized by the Stop Islamisation of Norway group. There is such a group. This in turn prompted counter-protests by another group. They started banging drums and chanting slogans against discrimination. Things took a violent turn when one protester ripped some pages from the Quran. This led to violence. Protesters jumped barricades. They climbed on the hoods of vehicles. They began kicking police vans. The cops used pepper spray and tear gas to keep the rival groups apart. Some 29 people were arrested. Some of them were minors. So two similar countries, two similar incidents, two similar protests. I come back to the question, what explains this frenzy? Norway and Sweden are not strangers to Islam. Islam is said to be the largest religion in Norway after Christianity. And in Sweden, Muslims make up at least 8% of the population. Then what explains the divide and the growing anti-Muslim sentiment? A lot of it has to do with immigrants and the failure of governments to deal with the issue. In recent years, there's been a rapid influx of asylum seekers in these two countries. I have some figures for you. In 2015, a record-breaking 160,000 asylum seekers entered Sweden. It was one of the most preferred destinations for a wave of Syrians, Afghans and others who reached European soil to escape war at home. As of today, about 1.6% of Sweden's population is said to be made up of immigrants, 1.6%. In Norway, immigrants account for 16% of the country's population. A total of 800,000 immigrants are said to be living in Norway, and this includes both foreign-born and Norwegian-born individuals. The immigrants faced resistance from the citizens. It reflected in the local politics and then in policy. Governments began changing their immigration policies. Immigration became a political hot potato. Where did the governments fail? You see, grandstanding in the name of human rights is one thing. Going the whole hog to ensure them is quite another. These governments gave shelter and citizenship to immigrants, all right, but failed to assimilate them with the local population. Also, there's a limit to how many immigrants a country can accommodate. The citizens of Norway and Sweden say that limit has long been breached. And now there's a cultural conflict. What I'm saying next will upset both sides, but here it is. One side in this divide is xenophobic. It feels its way of life is threatened. The other side comes with an overwhelming persecution complex. Violent protest is nobody's birthright. Citizen or immigrant, urban areas in these cities have become Muslim enclaves, parallel societies where Sharia is said to trump the Swedish and Norwegian laws. There are neighborhoods that follow their community leaders, not the Swedish or Norwegian government. And as for the citizens of Sweden and Norway, the ones who are protesting, they do not want to adapt to norms that are alien to them. They do not want neighborhoods that have increasingly become, quote-unquote, Islamicized. They link the surge of immigrants to an increase in violent crimes in the neighborhoods. They're angry with their respective governments. Some have banded together to patrol the streets and protect their neighborhoods. Some others have formed vigilante groups and resort to violence to get noticed. This cultural conflict has played out time and again in several different parts of the world. Sweden and Norway are just the latest victims. And by the way, these two countries have long sat in judgment of others on how violent protests must be dealt with. Now they must lead by example on how to uphold the interest of all groups. The world is watching.